Hello, this is Jonathan Fisher again and my wife Haleigh Fisher, and today we wanted to talk about praying for your spouse and 3 tips about praying for your spouse. Tip number 1 is that you pray that God change your heart as well as the heart of your spouse. Now there's 2 things I want to say about this. First of all, if I get angry or upset that my wife is praying that God change my heart, I've got to be crazy. And here's why. Why wouldn't I want to grow? I should not take it offensively if my wife is praying for my anger or for my patience or for my well-being in any way. If I have something inside of me that needs to shift, change, I need to get rid of it, God needs to cut it out with a scalpel, right? I need to understand that that's really healthy for me. And so even if that's something that changes my personality, even if that's something that would change the way I see the world, if it makes me look more like Jesus, that should be something we're praying for people about. So many people get really upset because they're like, oh my gosh, my wife prayed that I X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, but that's a good thing. And what you're saying is you don't want to be growing, you're intolerant of growth in your own life. And so that's one of my, I would say, soapboxes is we should be praying against the hard things and the hardness of our hearts in our lives. And if you're offended by that, there's something seriously wrong with the way you're seeing it. Obviously, in that same note, pray that God change your heart. So if I'm praying for my spouse, I also want more patience. I want to have more grace. I want to have more mercy for my spouse in the things that we're interacting with. And so asking God to change my own heart is just as important.
So the second tip is pray specific prayers. So I think a lot of times people don't know what to pray, or they're confused. They want like perfect prayers or they want right prayers. And so I think one of the best ways to do this is by praying specific prayers from the Bible. So the Bible is full of prayers that were handwritten by God's chosen people to write the Bible, and so they're God's words. So if we're praying God's words for people, then we know we're praying the things that God actually desires for them. So an example of this would be like in Ephesians. So this is Ephesians 3:14, and this is something I pray for Jonathan. For this reason I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that according to the riches of his glory he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. And so that's a very specific prayer from God's own word that's asking for Jonathan's growth and him to be rooted in God and to be rooted in what Christ has said about him. And so if you're not sure what to pray, pray that. Find prayers in the Bible and pray them. And then also, we can know that praying prayers that are full of hope and love and compassion and about God's faithfulness and about God being near to someone and then being made more into the image of Jesus. Those are all godly things to pray, even if you don't have the specific scriptures to pray.
That's an excellent point. Tip 3 is imagine the end result. Imagine what it would be like when that person has that hope or that has that patience or has a heart that's been melted into or formed into a heart that could love and cherish things more. Whenever you're praying these prayers for your spouse, imagine that end result. And that will give you the hope in those prayers. I know people that have prayed for years for their spouse's heart to change. And the thing that allows them to keep going is the hope whenever they see the vision of the end. Again, at the end of all things, as and for believers, something that we can hold near and dear is that God will ultimately revolutionize our hearts and we will look like Jesus one day. And that is the hope that we have, and we pray for those things to happen sooner. And a short piece here for praying for non-believers. If you have a spouse that's a non-believer or a family member that's a non-believer, imagine them worshiping God in a church service or out in a field somewhere, something beautiful. If you're imagining those things as you're praying for their salvation, it can bring about a hope that is just really sweet in thinking about them and thinking about all the mistakes that they might be making or thinking about all the hate or hurt that they have in their hearts. That can melt away some of that unbelief that you might have when praying for them. And so imagine the end result whenever you're praying. I think that was one of the most helpful things for me when praying for my unbelieving friends, is that. Thank you so much for watching our videos today. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. We'll have more coming out for you guys. And remember to be praying for each other as spouses.